Some of you have been with us since the very beginning, starting in 1999 when Jen and I toured America in our VW bus to share with people that we were planning on moving to Japan. It was in Japan in 2009 that we started Stop Slavery, and that's where a lot of you jumped on board. Back then, our kids were quite small, and we ended up moving to Thailand in 2011 and saw lots of different kinds of animals, snakes and snakes. Our kids got to feed tigers meat on a stick, birds, big lizards. I forgot what they're called. More big lizards, other lizards. That one was actually in Megan's bed. Scorpions and more scorpions, toads that didn't turn into princes, elephants and elephants, bats. I actually had to get rabies shot because of that particular bat. Ostriches and crocodiles and snakes. I called this Megan's snake face. Here's her Instagram face. But we moved to Thailand specifically to do anti-human trafficking work. And that was a big part of our first 5 years there in Chiang Mai. This was actually one time when I was supposed to be a movie producer. So I was an American movie producer on a particular sting. But mostly it was other people that were doing the investigative work. We had a number of different investigators come through with Stop Slavery, and then a lot that weren't with Stop Slavery that we worked with over the years, and did different work and training with some of those various groups. There were some hard things along the way as well. One of our students from Okinawa, Gok, was supposed to come work with us and her husband Vince. And as she was driving to graduation, she passed away. And there's just still echoes of that tragedy down through. But when we first landed, actually, before we even landed, we had begun work at the orphanage, Hope in Christ Orphanage in Siem Reap, Cambodia. Lots of fun memories, and some of those kids are still walking with the Lord. They're out now. One of the enduring things from our work in Cambodia, we still partner with a lady that I affectionately call the widow. And when we met her, this church was about half this size, meeting under an awning. And we have partnered together now for nearly 10 years. One of my favorite stories from our time in Cambodia was when I was driving out of the village one day. I saw this kid on a bike. I just snapped this from the tuk-tuk that I was riding in. And I thought, if Jesus were in my shoes, he'd probably buy a bike for every kid in this village. So I ended up buying a bike. It ended up actually like Calvary Chapel, Okinawa, and Koza Baptist got behind us. And we ended up buying 122 bikes for 2 villages and 2 orphanages. Actually was kind of a pivotal moment in the history of that church and that village, and was when many people ended up giving their life to Christ after the widow had been ministering there for a number of years. One of my favorite missions trips was when we actually built that church, and it was a lot of fun. Koza Baptist came out. We had, I think, 6 of us from Koza Baptist, and then about 20 villagers, and we built a church in a week. A lot of fun. One of the main things that we were involved with while we were in Thailand was obviously the discipleship schools. We started the Cadence DTS, now known as Life Compass. That has since moved to South Carolina, but that was a lot of fun. We were also involved with a lot of YWAM discipleship schools, specifically the Business as Mission discipleship schools that my friend Mark Plummer ran, along with Mark and Beth Stewart. This was our discipleship school from 2013, and then turned it over to the Turnages and Shorts after that. One of the YWAM discipleship schools, I took them on a 2-day prayer retreat up to a small village, and along the way there were 762 curves, and so hence this sign. Jen would help at times with the different businesses mission discipleship schools, but that was largely my domain. Here's one of my mentors teaching some of the students, Ron Wilson, who taught me a lot about movement of God and disciple making movements, and really enjoyed what I learned from him. We also spent a couple summers in Okinawa ministering there after living there for 10 years. It was always fun to go back. One of the things that I was telling a friend of mine, Kendall, at a little entrepreneurs gathering shortly before I left was I want to have space in my life. I felt like early in our time in Thailand, I was really stressed about how to get, how to do the anti-trafficking work and getting discipleship schools off the ground and facilities and money and resources and building projects. And I just said, yeah, I hope in this next season of life to be a little less stressed and a little just give space for God to do things. And one of the things that he said to me kind of resonated. He said, buddy, you accomplish more on accident than many people do on purpose. And I just thought of all the little kind of the side things that we were able to be involved with and the cool things that God did there. Just a single day of helping kids that had a lot of different needs was really fun. Johnny, who became a friend of mine down in Cambodia when we were starting the escape hunt down there. I was, just fun to connect with him on the street. Obviously, most of Jen's ministry occurred in the classroom and on the counseling couch. She really loved getting to share with her students from a biblical perspective, different aspects of psychology and the different AP classes that she taught. She pioneered a couple ones there and was a much loved teacher. Often students will say she's the best teacher they've ever had, and led to a lot of cool just relationships that she was able to speak life and the gospel into students' lives over the years. So really grateful for that platform that God gave her in the school to be able to disciple young people. One day on the way home, Jen and Adrian were actually still in the truck. Megan had just jumped out when this tree fell down and crashed on him. Adrian was telling Jen to cover her head because that's how most people perish in tornadoes and different things. This wasn't a tornado, but a bad storm. This was the discipleship school that we ran in 2012. And then the business that we started, Escape Hunt, in Chiang Mai, Thailand. Lots of fun, huge heartache as well as those crashed and burned. One of my favorite guys, I think my favorite assistant that I had in Thailand was Bay, first assistant, and he still is running a cafe that he started. I would ask him what his dream was, and he would tell me to have my own cafe. And so I was like, man, you could do it. You could totally have your own cafe. And so one day he said, okay, I'm going to do it. He quit and asked if he could have a loan. And a year and 4 months later, he paid me back. And he still has a thriving business there in Chiang Mai. The last few years, we've obviously done way more with Business as Mission, although a lot of those events were put down during COVID, which was unfortunate. But we were able to start our BAM school this last year. One of the other side things was just coaching, a number of seasons of coaching Jack after school and the young guys that were with him. Some of those young guys years later, I ended up having at my house for pizza on Tuesday nights. And we would go through some different discipleship materials and just allow them to be able to make disciples. I just had lunch with a guy, Casey, and he told me that was the best discipleship training he'd ever had. And he's involved now in making disciples in his church. And also that he would have never bought a house without our time together, because I told him it was possible to buy a house while in college. And because of Bitcoin and some other things, he was able to buy a brand new house in Denver, Colorado, in this crazy real estate market. Night Bazaar Evangelism, where we took students out on the streets to share the gospel with English speakers, was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed that over the years. One of my friends, Tommy Akawa, has run this ministry for years, and I helped him out for a few years and ran it one of the years when he was in the States. Quick trip to India at one point with the Velkers. A BAM trip to Cambodia where we visited a lot of different BAM businesses in the Siem Reap area. House church was a big part of our world there. I think Jen and I were involved in house church leadership about 7 of our 11 years there in Cambodia. And then men's ministry was a big deal, big part of my side projects. We would do a lot of prayer retreats, 48-hour kind of retreats to get alone with the Lord. We did a couple of sailing men's trips that were a lot of fun, some motorcycle trips. My friend Mark Plummer, that I would do a lot of the business's mission stuff with, organized a number of motorcycle trips that were a lot of fun for guys as well. And one of our fondest memories of our time there is pouring into a bunch of younger couples. We had a thing we called Young Church. The funny thing is the oldest of them are getting to be almost the age that we were when we were pouring into them. But that was a fun time. And one of the things that we'll miss greatly is just the community that existed in Chiang Mai. Specifically, one of the things the last few years it's been a lot of fun is just the couples on our street. And we will miss them. We started this last year, BAM School in Roanoke, Virginia, and got to have some students from Liberty who were focused on disciple-making movements interact with our students. And of course, Adrian got married last summer. Our little kids are now grown up, and Megan and Jack have both graduated from high school, and all 3 of them will be in college this year. And Jen and I began the empty nesting stage. Looking forward to that time. Jen will be taking care of her dad as I run another BAM school. But Jen will be spending a lot of her days and her time and energy with her dad. He's 93 and bedridden most of the time. So thank you so much for all of you that have been a part of our journey with Stop Slavery, specifically the last 11 and a half years in Thailand. And we look forward to what's next. One time Jen said, as we were talking about what we were doing, she's like, I don't care what we're doing as long as we're making disciples. And so that is what we hope to do for the next 30 years or so.